It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
All right. Welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. And you can find a link at emailrevealer.com. You can go there and get a copy of my book, an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. This show is brought to you by getthetea.com, lifechangetea.com. You go to getthetea.com and check out this Life Change tea. Now, I've only been drinking this now. People have been keeping track of this. I started drinking this tea, and I have about one glass a day in the morning. And I started this about 2 weeks ago, and I just checked the scale. I'm down to 200 pounds. I was 211, 212 when I started. So I've lost about 10 pounds since I started drinking this Life Change tea. And it's definitely it is a life-changing tea. I tell you that for a fact. And you crave it in the morning when you first get up. Gives you energy. It helps you with your digestion and stuff like that. I used to take a lot of those Tums and stomach medicine, Alka-Seltz and stuff like that, and apple cider vinegar, but I'm just drinking this tea. And I still, out of habit, I go down, I pick up a cup of coffee in the morning, just out of habit, but I don't even drink the whole thing anymore, so I'm going to probably cut that out. I'm just so used to driving by there and picking it up every day. Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Today we're going to have St. John Hunt. Is St. John Hunt online? Not yet.
Get him now.
He's here now? Okay. We're going to have St. John Hunt on the show today, who is the son of the Watergate burglar, E. Howard Hunt. Fascinating guy. He even has a tape of his dad, E. Howard Hunt, confessing to being involved in the JFK assassination. So,
he's here.
Okay, great. St. John Hunt. Mr. Hunt, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Why don't you remind the audience, who is St. John Hunt?
Such short notice. So pleased to be with you again.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Your audio sounds kind of crappy, though. What?
It does?
Yeah, it does. It's really bad. Hey, maybe Danny, we can make another call and try and get a better line. Is Danny there? How about this, John? Can you see the number on your caller ID? Could you just hang up and try and call it back? Like I was saying, St. John Hunt is the son of E. Howard Hunt, the Watergate burglar, and his mother also too died in a mysterious plane crash right around the time of the Watergate. I think it was she was getting a payoff or something like that. And a very mysterious plane crash. He's written 2 books about all this. And you can find it on his website as well.
Okay, back.
Okay, great. Okay, St. John, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Yeah, that sounds a lot better. So, yeah, so you've written a couple of books. Tell the audience about yourself.
Well, I'm the eldest son of a near legendary man of many years of covert operations in the CIA, and then later on in his infamous role as one of the part of the special investigations team known as the Plumbers, working for Richard Nixon, at which he spent 3.5 years in prison for the crimes he committed, which was a big surprise to him, because he said, like Nixon said in his interview, if the president does it, it is not a crime.
Right.
So being raised in a CIA family, I didn't find out my father worked in the CIA until I was 16. And it wasn't until fairly recently, in the last 5 years or so, that I found out my mother was a CIA contract agent. She had originally worked in the OSS in the late 40s, tracking Nazi jewels and gold and cash around across Europe, and so she enjoyed her work. She worked under Alan Dulles, who was then station chief in Bern, Switzerland, and that was the center of all things covert and spookified, if I could say, throughout Europe. And she kept with it. She was quite a classy gal, and she married my father, who had been in OSS as well. He fought over in Asia for his OSS detachment. And then when the CIA was formed, he jumped right in. So he was on the ground level of CIA and became known as a man of action, as a man who could get things done. He wasn't that Yale Ivy League type, but people appreciated his skills. He was also a writer. He had 88 books published by the time of his death, when he was 88, coincidentally enough. And so I grew up in this family of spies. And, 16, they told me, and it didn't really mean much to me because I didn't know what the CIA was from the FBI or from anything else. But, in the next few years, he retired supposedly from CIA and then got a job with President Nixon, working as one of the plumbers to plug the leaks of the famous Pentagon Papers, which had been leaked in the New York Times by Daniel Ellsberg. So, and in more recent times, the last 10, 15 years, I've realized that any child growing up in a CIA family is going to be faced at some point in their lives with the fact and realization that everything they thought they knew about themselves, their family, their travels, their mission in life is a lie. Mm-hmm. And I think this has a devastating effect on many young adults when they finally come to terms with this. And that's what I've had to deal with most recently. Just the fact that I feel more like a piece of luggage being toted around than I do as part of the tight-knit family, that loving and doing things together. So it's been a strange ride.
That's interesting because you've been on the show a couple of times. We spent like 4 hours together. You never mentioned that you felt that way before. This is something new?
Well, I think what it is I'm able to put it in the right phraseology. I don't have anger issues behind it, but it's something that I want to investigate further in terms of showing the collateral damage that that parents or a parent has in the covert world, and what it does, what it potentially can do to the children of that parent or parent. So I think the more I delve into the whole thing, I keep seeing new little things that, that's why I feel this way. That's why I can't talk to my son or whatever, which is not true. But I'm quite the opposite of my father. We had some good times bonding over music mostly, and he was just a very, very incredible guy. And my mother too.
Right, and you've written a couple of books. One about your mother, Dorothy, An Immoral, Dangerous Woman, The Murder of E. Howard Hunt's Wife, Watergate's Darkest Secret. We had you on about that. And the other one is Bond of Secrecy, My Life with CIA Spy and Watergate Conspirator E. Howard Hunt. And I noticed that you just did one recently, since you've been on the last show, The Bush Crime Family. The inside story.
Yes, I wrote that with Roger Stone, who was my co-author in a new about-to-be-published book of our combined writings that we've done together. And that should be a fun book to read. But, Roger and I, he's a very complicated man, as my father was, too. But it turns out he knew, he had met my father once very briefly back in the day, and he was also fairly good friends with William F. Buckley Jr., the well-known right-wing conservative publisher of National Review and of that debate show, Firing Line, that he had on PBS for many, many years. He was my godfather. So Roger and I came to become pretty good friends.
Yeah, now William F. Buckley, he actually took custody of you. He raised you for a while, am I right?
No, he didn't. He came down to our house and had some goons basically kidnap my younger brother David, who was 9 at the time, and take him down to live with his godfather, who was a very well-known and respected Cuban leader of the Brigade 2506, which was the brigade that landed at Bay of Pigs in that failed attempt to overthrow the Castro government. And so that was William F. Buckley. He was my godfather and my sister's godfather, but he was a busy man, so he never raped us or anything. He just did things like kidnapping my brother.
Right. What a life, man.
Great stuff.
And William F. Buckley, people know him from firing lines from the TV show on Sunday mornings, the news debate show he used to do with Gore Vidal would come on there, and Norman Mailer would come on there and debate with him. But little known fact about William F. Buckley is he was CIA as well, right?
That is a fact. I think it's a little more well known now than probably 5 or 6 years ago. But my father met Buckley when Buckley was very young and recruited him into the CIA. At which time my father was station chief in the brand new Mexico City CIA station, and that's where he brought Uncle Bill, we called him, to be recruited in the CIA. And I think, it's like the mafia. Once you're in the CIA or in the mafia, you don't really ever really retire. So, I mean, Buckley's always claimed that he was in the CIA officially for a few years, and then he wanted to move on to other pursuits. But, it's not that clean cut.
Gotcha. Now, you were saying a minute ago that you have a new book coming out, co-authored with Roger Stone. What's going to be the topic of that book?
The topic of that book is that Roger and I have been writing op-ed pieces for a year and a half, both for his blog site, Stone Cold Truth, as well as, many other outlets. I don't really know all of them, but it's really an inside view of the machinations of the Mueller investigation, his relationship with Roger's relationship with Donald Trump, with the Clintons, and all these things it's a fighting war of words, because as the mainstream media has pulled back so far from any truthful representation of the news or world events, people like Roger Stone and now myself have done what we can to write things and put the word out of it's not like that. It's more like this, And so this is a compilation of a little over a year's worth of writing, and it's quite it's quite robust, and it covers a lot of different things. All the current things that Roger's been involved in with the WikiLeaks hacking and the Russian collusion and all this stuff. It's all in there.
When can we expect this? That's going to be a bestseller.
Well, I don't know. I hope it'll do some pretty good sales. This is our first attempt at an Amazon self-publishing book, and it's called Away with Words, which is a little double entendre in there. But we're still working on the cover. We've got all the printing materials already logged in and everything, and we're just kind of putting finishing touches on it. And he's got to do some kind of maneuvering with his other publishing, his Skyhorse publishers, and get out, maneuver himself so he can get this out too. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I can see it. It's up on Amazon right now. Away with Words. Away is in far away with words. Yeah,
you can take it either way. There's a Kindle edition that's out, and we have no promotion. I don't even think it's sold one Kindle copy. I just got it in there, and then I thought, well, doing the paperback copy is going to be a breeze, but it's not a breeze. It's a whole different ballgame. But we're getting there. It shouldn't take more than another 2 weeks or so to get everything finalized, and then we'll do a little press campaign, put the word out.
Gotcha. Okay. I got another scoop. I got another Opperman Report scoop here. Great. This is good to hear.
That's right. In fact, that's the first time it's been announced anywhere.
I'll put out a press release because this is big news. Now, So you've been with Roger like daily while all this is going on, all this, how's he holding up?
He's holding up very well. Roger is a man of, his brain is like a machine. I mean, this guy can recall a name and the date of a senator or a junior senator or a congressman or someone that was running in the congressional race 34 years ago, 20 years ago, and just like that. He's a guy that never stops working. It's one of those types. That's not me. I'm more, I've worked, 4 or 5 hours. I'm ready to take a nap or something,
Right.
I saw him yesterday, and we spent a couple hours together. Just came back from Great Britain. He did 3 lectures, one at Oxford Union, and I don't know what the other 2 were, but they were pretty prestigious, and he enjoyed himself. And, he's gotten himself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And people are always ready to blame Roger Stone for any number of crazy things. I mean, this whole, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange is a complete and utter lie. I mean, it never happened. Just as if President Trump's supposed collusion. It's a Russian delusion, is what it is, more than a collusion.
Okay, yeah. I just saw Stone on with Chuck Todd the other day, and he really handled himself quite well. I thought. I thought he really dominated the interview. Now, a couple of questions for you. One, have you been questioned by Mueller's group or called him to be questioned by any of these Senate investigations?
No, I have not.
Okay. And your politics, because I know the first few times we talked, you grew up sort of a leftist, a progressive liberal type. And now your politics are more aligned with Stone?
Well, they're more aligned with a sense of a rejection of the two-party system because, as Rogers says, how could it be that so many of the staff in crucial positions that worked for the Bush presidency can then transport themselves over to the Obama presidency?
Right.
I mean, they should be like night and day. So what I've come to realize, in fact, is that Roger is a conservative, but he's got liberal views, as I do, for the abortion issue, gay marriage, gay rights, civil rights, certainly, and the complete and utter stopping of these crazy wars that there's no value to them. They're just a way to spend money and make money for a very elite class of people. So, I'm still kind of conservative in some ways. I'm old school. So, but, marijuana and drugs in general and all that stuff is, that's a personal decision. And there's so much that we've stripped away. The government has stripped away from the American citizens. And the older I get, the harder it is to deal with the fact that everything that I grew up knowing, not just in my family, but in the world around me, is backwards, upside down, or a lie. I mean, Hitler, he didn't die in Berlin. This is my opinion. 9/11, that wasn't done by
19 hijackers.
People living in a cave. You know what I'm saying? So everything, it's so untruthful. Even things like Darwin's principle of evolution, I just don't buy it anymore. I just think that there's more information that the government is not giving its citizens on a huge, broad level, and I don't know why they're doing that. We're not scared to know the truth. We should be advancing intellectually in terms of learning new things. But if they're going to put a hold on everything and tell us some story, eventually, it's time for another revolution or something.
Now, one last question about your personal politics. Roger Stone has a tattoo of Nixon on his back. Would you get a tattoo of Trump on your back?
I'd get a tattoo of Roger Stone.
He seems to be like a really charismatic guy that people really are drawn to him, huh?
Yeah, he's extremely charismatic. He's a very dapper and well-spoken person. He's very polite, very agreeable. he's not like the cold-hearted
Right.
political assassin that he's been made out to be. And much of what has been talked about Roger is mythology, which he's the first one not to even deny it, because as one of Roger's rules is, one of the worst things one can do is be boring. So, when people accuse him of causing the resignation of that governor in New York, what was his name?
Spitzer. Elliot Spitzer.
Right. He won't deny it. He won't offer any factual evidence, and he won't stamp his feet and say, I did it, but he's not going to deny a lot of things. Roger worked so many years in the shadows in these presidential elections, Reagan and Bush's and so forth, that people barely remember seeing him in places, but the effect he created was impacted the election, like the little riot he created down in South Florida, for, to take the vote away from to take the vote towards Bush,
right,
between that election. So he's a pretty wily guy.
Yeah, what St. John is talking about is when they were counting the Chads, Roger Stone brought in a bunch of these Cuban guys in white shirts with short sleeves, banging on the window. I tell you, it's brilliant. What about his stuff with Al Sharpton? You ever talk about his business with Al Sharpton?
No, I didn't. I'm not even aware of they have any business.
He was Al Sharpton's campaign manager when Al Sharpton ran for president. I got to talk to him about this one day. One more question about.
We'll be up in D.C. We're both going to D.C. This evening to attend the big event JFK conference there in Sterling, Virginia, which is right outside of D.C. And it's kind of an important trip for me because, of course, when Watergate happened and my mother was killed, my father went to prison. I left Washington, D.C. We lived in Potomac, Maryland, on the outskirts of the D.C. city line. And I haven't really been back.
Wow.
So this is going to be like the completion of a full circle. I'm going to be able to visit my cemetery where my mother is buried and pay my respect. And kind of like it's a big deal for me to go back there after all this time, when so much happened in that city that could have destroyed my life, and nearly did.
Hey, thank you so much then for taking time out, because I know you're heading off to the airport right after you do this interview. So thank you so much, man. I think I caught you on a good day when you're very reflective on your life. I think I know. Now, what do you make too now? Coming from your CIA background, it appears to me that there's a CIA thread going from the first Bush, obviously, then Clinton with his CIA connections down there in Mena, Arkansas, and then Obama, who went to work for Business International, a CIA front company, right out of college. And then we have this monkey wrench, Trump. Do you see that CIA thread running through the presidency?
I do. I very much do. And that basically started with JFK, of course. The CIA had been had been in strength in their duties prior to JFK, but when I think Truman was the one that created the mandate for CIA, and between Truman and Eisenhower leading up to JFK, there wasn't a lot of there weren't a lot of problems between the White House and the intelligence community. But as the CIA, with each new little coup d'etat that they performed, with each new mini war that they fronted, or war behind, like the Guatemalan coup, the CIA was behind that. There was the one in was it Afghanistan or Iran? No, it was Iran.
Iran.
Even before Guatemala. Yeah. With the oil thing with the British. Every time something like that worked in the CIA, they realized that they were forming a powerful entity to govern foreign policy of the United States. And that had always been the domain of the president, the White House, and the Foreign Service. And Kennedy was first president really to come head-to-head against the CIA in the full realization that these guys and these folks are dictating the foreign policy of this country. Because, as Kennedy found out, and his brother Bobby Kennedy found out, they only knew a small percentage of the operations the CIA was involved. I mean, there were assassination groups. There was, the training of, militia. There was sabotage in other countries. I mean, they had a whole array of items on their table that they didn't need to check with anybody else. Is it okay if we do this? Can we go into that country and just kill their leader and do this? They felt that they were the final authority on all that stuff. And Kennedy, being at that time, 1962, 1963, it was scary for him, I'm sure, because this was a huge monster that had just broken its chains and was running rampant. And that, of course, is one of the main reasons why Kennedy had to go.
Is that what you're going to be sharing about Kennedy tonight?
Actually, I don't speak until Sunday, but, I always wing it because I tried having copious notes and all this stuff, and people really enjoy it when I just sit down on the edge of the stage, the microphone, and just talk to them like I'm talking to you. They can raise their hands and ask questions, and I really affect people that way. I read a letter of apology to Caroline Kennedy, which I wrote two Novembers ago, and I read it every time I do a lecture or a speech, saying just how deeply sorry and the weight of what I've had to carry, that my father could have had and probably had something to do with the murder of her father, and in my view, how wonderful she's carried this horrible thing. I mean, this was horrible, and I just felt so sorry that the man also stepped up and apologized. So it brings me to the precipice of emotions. But that's what people draw on when they hear me. It's because it's such a human element. I'm not. All the other lecturers, they're all great guys, great researchers, and they've embraced me wholly, but their facts, figures, graphs, diagrams, photo overlays, photo facial reconstruction, all these numbers and figures and this and that, and I'm just a regular person just talking, about how it's affected me personally and in my life, and people can really relate to that.
Okay, so now give us a rundown. Who's going to be speaking? Where is it? How can we find it? How can we buy tickets?
Oh yeah, well, it's going to be held in Sterling, Virginia. So you'll be flying into to the Dulles Airport and get a free transport over to the hotel. It's at the Holiday Inn, and it's going to be starting tomorrow at early, I think 10 a.m. People can go online to JFKConferenceBC.com, JFKConferenceBC.com, and it's called The Big Event. And there's going to be a hell of a lot of good speakers there. Ed Tatro, who's one of the finest researchers into the JFK assassination, Dr. Cyril Wecht, who was the nation's top pathologist. Roger Stone's going to be there. I'm going to be there. So is Gordon Ferry, Judith Berry Baker, who was Lee Harvey Oswald's summertime fling in New Orleans right before the assassination. Chris Milligan of Friday Books is going to be there. The topics are going to be vast and extremely interesting. James Spetzer, who's written many books, is an excellent author and researcher. He's going to be speaking there. And it's going on from tomorrow morning to the 11th, Sunday. I fly back on the 11th.
Okay, excellent. It's called The Big Event, JFKConferenceDC.com. Now, we were talking about the CIA, this threat of the CIA through the presidency all these years. But it seems like there's a departure from that with Trump, right? But are you concerned with Trump surrounding himself with these generals?
I'm concerned about a lot of things. Trump now, according to Roger, who spoke with yesterday, is is isolated himself.
Right.
He's alone in the position he's in, and the CIA is no friend to him. He doesn't really have doesn't have a strong support group, and I'm worried because one of the hopes was we were going to suck up this scum from the what do they call it, the
deep state.
The deep state or the swamp. We got to drain the swamp. That's what it was. And I just don't, I just see them being a lot of Republicans who are still angry that their choice, Bush or Rubio, didn't make it, and certainly all the Democrats whose choice of Clinton didn't make it. I was going to vote for Bernie myself.
Yeah,
he was my guy. That's my politics, basically. But Trump, because he's such a renegade, because he's not going to initially kowtow to military industrial complex. I'll give him support, and I have in the many things that I've written to expose these people that are trying to bring him down.
The other day, we saw this fascinating, I don't even know how to describe it, Sam Nunberg. Did you know him?
No, I never met him, but I talked to Roger about that yesterday. They're not friends, but on the one side, I applaud the fact that he says he's not going to honor the subpoena, and then I asked Roger, well, but why is he bringing up your name? Why is he saying, why should I show anybody my emails with Roger Stone, for example? I mean, when I heard that on the news, I looked up and I'm like, uh-oh, Roger's in trouble again.
Right.
But that's the position he's put himself in. He enjoys a good battle. I mean, he's been battling his whole life against, one of his biggest regrets is that he put so much of his energy behind Bush, which he regrets. But that is one of his few and only regrets. Besides that, he's a Nixon man, and his book about Nixon, I wrote the newest chapter on, in which vindicates Richard Nixon from all of his crimes, and it points out that the Watergate hearings and the trial itself were decked towards the left. Judge Sirica was having secret meetings with the prosecutors and with the prosecutor witnesses. They were colluding big time to bring Nixon down, and that should have if that had come out then, my father would not. It would have been a mistrial. I mean, Judge Sirica, broke the law many times by colluding with the prosecution, designing how they were going to present their case. He was supposed to do that. He became judge and jury, and my father spent, almost 4 years in federal prison for Watergate, and he would not have done so.
Now, you taped a confession with your father, where you confessed to being involved in the JFK assassination. How was that being received?
Well, that was I received that tape from my father back in 2005, I think. And I put it up and out there right away, YouTube, Coast to Coast, broke the news. And mainstream media, aside from 60 Minutes, mainstream media has not touched it. And 60 Minutes didn't follow through with their episode that they were going to, give me a 20-minute slot of a 60-minute show. I had already had meetings in San Francisco with some of their top guys, and they looked at all the evidence and heard the tape and did voice matching and handwriting analysis matching and all that stuff. And a month and 6 weeks later, I got a call from 60 Minutes saying, "I'm sorry to tell you, Mr. Hunt, we're not going to go with it. It's the high ups. They're just too volatile. People back then didn't really want to get behind the idea that LBJ had something to do with the assassination. It was the mafia, or the Cubans or the Russians or whoever. But now it's much more popular and much more acceptable to at least admit, or for American citizens get their heads around the idea that LBJ had something to do with the Kennedy assassination. And I go into that in my book, Fond of Secrecy. Roger wrote a whole book, which was a New York Times bestseller, called The Man Who Killed Kennedy. And there's been a lot of other great authors. Bob McClellan is one of the earliest ones. He was a lawyer working in Johnson's legal firm. And he wrote a book about LBJ's involvement in the Kennedy assassination. So people are kind of coming around, but we are never going to get an admission of truth or guilt from any part of the government. I mean, Julius Caesar was murdered by his inner circle of senators. Jesus was betrayed and set up by his inner circle. I mean, so those are only two, probably hundreds of examples of people in power being sold out by their inner circle, who are there supposed to protect them, or at least be truthful. And it's no different when Kennedy out. Absolutely no different.
So your father's confession conforms with the Rogers theory that JFK was, or that LBJ was behind it?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
My father admitted to me that LBJ, in my father's opinion and from his knowledge, that LBJ was huge in the Kennedy assassination, knew about it beforehand, gave it the green light. I mean, after all, LBJ didn't have a lot to do with in terms of planning and that sort of thing. That was left up to the people that, like my father and the others that were part of the actual on-the-ground plan. But LBJ had to certainly give it the green light, and J. Edgar Hoover had to give it a green light, because all Hoover had to do was apprehend all the evidence in Dallas and move it to Washington, D.C., where nobody could get to do anything with it. It was just a few hours after the assassination that Hoover was already saying that that they had the one guy and stuff. And even less than 2 hours, they already had Lee Harvey Oswald. And that's one great thing about Oswald's girlfriend in that summer, Judith Barry Baker, who's come under a lot of criticism and a lot of examination, but she's a truthful, honest person. She's a wonderful gal. And I call her mom. She calls me son. She lost a lot of her family because of what she admitted about her relationship with Oswald, and how Oswald was not a shooter in the JFK assassination. So she's lost her family. I've lost most of my family because me putting out the information that my father was, at the very least, aware of the plans, if not, as he called himself, a bench warmer in it. And I respect her very much for that. So, it's been an absolute struggle for all of us to get the truth out. And people go, well, why is it even important anymore? Well, because if it's not important, then what is the value of anything? I mean, you've got to draw the line somewhere. And even though 50 odd years that may have gone by, to me, it's still just as important as it was the day after it happened. Because if you let that line in the sand keep changing, then it can get much worse.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I had Judith Baker on the show, and her detractors are a very angry bunch. let's just leave it at that. The people that don't like her really don't like her, and she is an elderly woman. You got to give people a break. Now, what would we find? You co-wrote this book with Roger Stone, The Bush Crime Family. What would we find in there?
Oh, wow. That was really interesting for me, because I had to do a tremendous amount of research, fact-checking, double-checking, and then a lot of reading, and then checking those facts. So I wrote the section starting with the basic history of the Bush family coming over here from Europe, and building their empire. I took that through the original Bush guy, and then, of course, through George Herbert Walker, his father, and then through Poppy and George W. Bush, delving into, for example, the Prescott Bush's relationship with the Nazi before and during World War II. And even prior to that, in World War I, the banks, the Harriman and Bush related transactions, which were selling arms to the Germans and the Russians and anybody that they felt they could make a buck off of. The transition from the original Remington factory was actually worked building railroad ties, and they came across the coupler links between the two train compartments, and that's where all the money came from. But they weren't patriots in the sense that when Russia it was declared war on Germany, that they were just going to go ahead and continue selling arms to the enemy, and that brought about a huge issue in D.C. Trading with the Enemy Act, and they confiscated all of Prescott Bush's funds from the Harriman banking people and a lot of other banks, and eventually they released Prescott to use that money to mold his son, George Herbert Walker Bush, into presidential material, although he never really, I don't think, ran successfully for any office. He seemed to just sort of wheedle his way into places. But it's a very interesting history of a family with fingers in the pie for all kinds of maybe not illegal, but immoral, certainly. I mean, selling to the enemy and banking on all the profits, colluding with the Nazis during when Auschwitz was there to mine coal for the German iron and coal production syndicate, and the Bushes and the Harrimans had a large amount of stake in those companies. I'm a little rusty with a lot of the details, but it's a fascinating book. And then I wrote the chapter, this is like a third of or more of the book that I've been thinking of. Then we did a redo on it, and I wrote the chapter on George P. Bush, the next up-and-coming Bush contender.
Yeah, what do you make of him? He's the guy that's running. He's running for office right now, right?
He's pretty much of a lightweight,
Yeah.
And as Jeb is, George Prescott Bush. I don't know. He was a stalker, and he was in college, with his girlfriend and stuff. He broke into, tried to get into her house, her parents' house, and was arrested and all that stuff. And he was a wild party guy, but he's been involved in Florida politics now for a number of years, and kind of keeping in the background. But I think he's going to start stepping up, and I would just be very worried because obviously the faith and the Bush legacy is going to be placed on him, and they're just going to bypass Jeb because Jeb just doesn't have it. He doesn't have charisma. He doesn't have very much intelligence. He's not a go-getter. He's fulfilled his role as governor of Florida in helping the Bush get elected. So,
in your research,
George Prescott Bush.
In your research of the Bushes, did you look into that whole theory? Well, it's not even a theory. Barbara Bush's mother did live with Crowley, Aleister Crowley.
I never heard that before.
Okay.
Maybe I did. Maybe I read it somewhere, but I'm not really sure.
Oh, no, there's letters. There's letters and stuff. The theory is, though, that they had a relationship, and if you look at pictures of the young Bush brothers in their college years, they look a lot like Crowley, man. So I don't know.
Looking like Crowley is no indictment as to anybody's personality or anything. I think Aleister Crowley was, he's been mythologized since the B666, but he was actually a marvelous poet, an adventurer, an explorer, a mountain climber, a writer, one of the premier opium and heroin addicts of his time. It was a generation where there was a lot of experimenting going on. He was definitely promiscuous and had many orgiastic sex exploits. But I think his greatest role is so that people can go, "Oh, Crowley, he was the B666." They don't really know anything else about him. I mean, he had developed his own tarot deck, and he wrote books about the Egyptians and Thoth and all this stuff. He was quite an intellectual. So I got nothing but pluses to say about Aleister Crowley. He's not a Satanist.
Yeah, we had this conversation before.
There are any.
Yeah, we actually had this conversation before. I recall now.
Oh, okay.
Now, in your research too. By the way, people got to go back. We did 4 hours with St. John Hunt, 4 excellent hours. And I would encourage people to go back into the archives on Spreaker and on YouTube and look for those shows and listen to the progression of St. John Hunt. This is I'm really enjoying this conversation. What about there's that myth out there or a rumor that I believe is true that there exists a photo of George W. Bush standing on a bar, either naked or urinating? Did you come across that?
No, it wouldn't surprise me, but you know, they've done a lot to keep little leaks like that coming out. I mean, I'm sure they had something to do with Barry Seal's murder,
right?
You know, because you know, he was threatening to blow the lid on the Bush boys, their cocaine use, the whole Mina thing, Arkansas, and they took him out. They took my mother out. They took Marilyn Monroe out. You know, this is not just specific to one presidential candidate or one president. This is systematic in the whole entire, you know, our government in terms of what the presidents will do or what his inner circle will do or get involved in to stop someone from blowing. As my mother told me, she said when she landed in Chicago, she was going to have a press conference with Michelle Clark, who was a CBS News anchorwoman, to blow the White House out of the water. And of course, you know, the plane blown up in the air before it even landed, misguided to a vacant runway, and FBI was all over the place in 30 minutes, 40 FBI agents, which is unheard of. In those days, there was no cell phones or anything. I mean, these guys were all set up waiting for that plane to crash somewhere. And yeah, that's documented in my book Dorothy, which has all that information.
Yeah, very underreported aspect to the Watergate story is that St. John Hunt's mother was assassinated. There's pretty no doubt about it. And then Nixon actually appointed someone to change the head of the FAA who investigated the plane crashes, like days after. Am I correct?
The very next day was one of Nixon's most loyal troopers, Eagle Crow, who was also happened to be my father's boss and the plumber. He appointed him Undersecretary of Transportation, which oversaw the National Transportation and Safety Board's investigation into that crash. So he was not only relaying information about the investigation to Nixon, but also he was able to steer it and point it in directions that he felt necessary.
Yeah, no one ever talks about that, you know. And now, what about too? The movie just came out, The Post, about the whole thing with Daniel Ellsberg. Now, your father was the one who broke into his psychiatrist's office.
That's correct. He and his pal Gordon Liddy were their charge was to the request from the White House was to do something about the leak of the Pentagon Papers by Ellsberg to the New York Times, which Nixon at first wasn't really bothered by, but Henry Kissinger convinced Nixon that it would show that he was weak if he didn't go after the scumbags that leaked the stories. Which proved that Vietnam was an unwinnable war, and flew in direct opposite of that time current spiel by the government and the military industrial complex that everything was going well. It was a winnable war. We just need 50,000 more troops, and they'll be home by next year or whatever. And the study commissioned in the Defense Department showed that those were complete fabrications, a complete lie to the American people, just to keep the Vietnam War going. So they charged my father, and they ordered my father and Gordon Liddy to do something about it. My father thought that, well, we know that Ellsberg's has a psychiatrist. Maybe we can find out there's some dirt, maybe some incest or some some philanderings in his marriage or something. And so they undertook the first part of the operation was to case the place out, take photographs of the outside, gain entrance to the inside. When the maid was there, they said that they were friends of Ellsberg and just let them in, and they took photographs and stuff. And then they came back a week or two later and broke in. He didn't actually do the breaking in, but his Cubans from the old Bay of Take Days did. And those guys, some of those guys were Operation 40 members, of which my father was one of the creators of Operation 40, which was the off-the-shelf, standalone, executive action, wet work arm of the CIA. They were the guys that would do the assassinating, kidnapping, torturing of foreign diplomats, presidents, secretaries of countries that didn't fall in behind the United States of America's idea of world domination.
Do you think there's an Operation 40 in existence right now?
I'm sure there has to be. Absolutely has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably more secret than ever. But there's definitely an executive action arm of the CIA that still into, absolutely.
We only got about 4 minutes left, and I really want to thank you again. Sam Nunberg seems to think that they have perjury charges against Stone. He thinks that Stone may have slipped up. I think he's a smart guy. I don't think he would knowingly go in and lie to Congress or lie to the FBI. But they think he thinks they got something on him. Would Stone
on Trump or Stone?
Stone. Would Stone flip, or would he go to jail?
Well, it depends what's at stake. I mean, I don't believe Roger perjured himself. I think he's way too smart for that. And most importantly is the fact that there is and never was any evidence of a relationship between him and Julian Assange in a direct level, whereas Assange had information bad for Clintons, and Roger was privy to that information and then announced that, it's just that there's never been anything like that ever. And so I would find it hard to believe that he had to perjure himself on any level. I think that Nunberg is just trying to deflect. And who better to deflect toward would be Roger Stone, the man that's, the devil himself. But a good friend of mine.
Right. And what about Stone's connection to Assange? What do you make of Assange these days? Because it did come out that he's kind of in the bag for Trump, and he was offering to leak his tax returns and stuff. What do you make of Assange these days?
I think Julian Assange is a hero. I think he's what we need more of. Certainly more people like himself, and also people that are willing to take risks to. Not everything is pure and 100%. So if Assange has elements and percentages of his character or his doing that may seem contradictory from his general purpose, I think that's quite human. I mean, I'm not perfect and pure, so I mean, I may seem this, and then I have a little bit of that bad in me. So if Julian's done some things, I think that's just because, look at him. He's, he organized this whole WikiLeaks thing, which, who was that soldier that's still in prison probably for the rest of his life that released through WikiLeaks like 10 billion pages of classified.
Manning, he's out.
State Department.
Manning.
Who?
Chelsea Manning, right?
Yeah,
right. He's out. He's out. He's getting a sex change. He's out. Yeah, he's out. He's out. And he has a sex change now, and he's a whole new life.
Really? That's great. I didn't watch the news hardly at all. I'm just disgusted by the whole news media thing, against Donald Trump. I think it's shameful behavior and embarrassing.
St. John, I can't think enough. We got less than 1 minute. What do you want to leave us with?
Never stop fighting. And that's something that Richard Nixon said. As I say those words, one of the last things he said as president was, never stop fighting and don't hate, because if you hate, they win.
St. John Hunt, thank you so much, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Good night, brother. Thank you. And now a word from our sponsors.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What a bunch of crap. I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Sorry. I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by EmailRevealer.com. You can go to EmailRevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites. And we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication or involved in an extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Adoption investigations. If you want to locate your birth parents or your birth child you gave away for adoption, we can do adoption investigations for you. Asset searches for you. Locate bank accounts, hidden assets, hidden properties, hidden income, all different kinds of services in the asset search investigation. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we do an email trace investigation for you, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. You can find my work at emailrevealer.com. Also like to, the show is brought to you by GetTheTea.com, LifeChangeTea.com. I've been drinking this tea for 2 weeks now. I got more energy. I'm losing weight. I crave the tea when I get up in the morning. It tastes great. It helps you with your digestion and all kinds of constipation and things like that. Losing weight, more energy, Life Change Tea. I'm feeling great. I'm loving the tea. Want to give a shout out to St. John Hunt. You can catch him at the JFK Conference, JFKConferenceDC.com. It's called a big event. He's going to be there all week in DC. There, a bunch of speakers. Or Chris Milligan, our buddy's going to be down there. So check out St. John Hunt, the son of E. Howard Hunt, Watergate burglar. Going to be at JFKConferenceDC.com. Check it out. Okay. We've got a fascinating guest today. We have John Tinker. Mr. Tinker, are you there? Oh, I can't hear you at all.
Not hear me?
try to speak up a little bit there. Maybe Danny can turn up your audio too.
I'm on the telephone here.
You're on what?
I'm on a landline.
Okay. Hey, Danny, can we try and reconnect that phone call?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Why would this be? I can't hear him at all. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Well, Mr. Tinker, tell the audience, who is John Tinker?
Who is John Tinker? Well, most people would know me in association with 1969 Supreme Court case, Tinker v. Des Moines. I was 15 years old and sued the Des Moines public school system on a First Amendment ground. I'm getting quite a bit of echo here, and it's making it hard to form coherent sentences.
I can't hear you at all.
Okay. I can hear both of us.
John, before we get into the whole thing about the First Amendment and the Supreme Court case, tell the audience, who is John Tinker today? What do you do?
Well, today I'm the station manager for a small community radio station in Fayette, Missouri. It's located right here in our home, which also is the old public school building. So we have an old public school building here, a beautiful 3-story brick building with an antenna on the top, and we've got software that keeps our radio station on the air and a couple of computer networks. I'm a software guy myself, so that keeps me pretty busy. But I'm also developing a website that I've been working on for about 17 years right now. It's an ambitious website. I have news feeds that are automated and cross-referenced to each other. So I've got about 20,000 right now of different, they're basically search arguments that go out into the internet and get news items, and then I run them through a sort of a filter so that I try to keep some of the junk out. But I try to provide a reasonably good index to current news to a global audience. We have 20,000 topics that covers pretty much the whole globe and lots of things within it. So that all keeps me busy. We heat with wood, so I also cut a lot of wood. You really want to know how I spend my day?
Okay, well, I got a couple of questions for you before we get started. How'd you wind up in a schoolhouse?
Well, I always wanted a big building. Now, I tell this story, and sometimes people think I'm kidding a little too much, but when I was a little kid, going to kindergarten, actually, and they took us on a tour of our school building in a little town called Atlantic, Iowa. And I just loved the building. I kind of they introduced us to the janitor of the building, and they explained how he was really the most important person here. I mean, the teachers are important, of course, the students are important, but the janitor, he makes it all work. And so I have a real early love affair with large buildings, and I had some in a small town in Iowa, a different town, but they were all in pretty bad shape. So my sister was a physician here in this small town in Missouri, and she said, "Hey, the public school's for sale. You should come down and look at it." And by coincidence, that happened during a little window of a few years where I actually had a real job, and I was able to afford to buy this building. So I love it to pieces. It's a very, very substantial building. My neighbor, she died a few years ago at 95 years old. She said, yeah, when it was built, it was the best building in town, and I believe it. It's a really nice, solid, beautiful building.
It's the kind of building, if there's a hurricane or something, that's where people would go and
there was a tornado in Joplin a few years back. You may have heard of that. And it was devastating. I mean, it killed a whole bunch of people and just wiped out the town. And one of the guys from the University of Missouri in Columbia, who was sort of an expert on some community phase, or he was an emergency coordinator type of specialty, and he had gone down to Joplin. Well, he happened to be up here in my in what we call our kitchen. It's a classroom, but we use it as a kitchen. And we were having a meeting about solar panels that he was promoting. And he said, well, if there were a tornado here, this is the building you'd want to be in. So
yeah.
I don't want to be in a tornado anyway, but
tornado. They don't have hurricanes down there, though. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, also, too, you own a radio station. What do you play? What do you put on the show, on the station?
We have a real mix. Actually, I'm a radio engineer. It was one of my previous incarnations from way back. I always wanted to be a ham radio operator, and I studied hard, and I got my ham radio license. I just, on a lark, kind of took my commercial license and became a chief engineer at a small AM station up in Iowa City. But when I saw the window for the FCC filing for the low-power FM licenses back in 2013, I kind of jumped. Well, it was a delayed jump, but they extended the deadline a couple times because of the government shutdown. And anyway, I got an application in, and by golly, we got the license. So we played. I tested the station with some music from an Andean band that I used to play in up in Iowa, and then I tried out some Chris Hedges speeches and climatology speeches and things like that, but kind of upset some of the community. But then we moved into more of a regular schedule, so we play like jazz overnight, then classical, and then in the morning we do local community announcements and so on in the morning, and then we move into Amy Goodman's Democracy Now!
Very nice.
We play a number of syndicated programs that we get from PRX, and we've got automated scripts, that bring them in. So a lot of it runs by itself, but we do have a nice crew of volunteers here, about a half a dozen community people that are very loyal, dedicated to the radio. It really was a surprise to me to see the dedication that volunteers were willing to put in to it. And so they do their own shows. They do different, whatever kind of music they like. And then my wife, she interacts with PRX quite a bit and is always looking for good stuff. So we do like Backstory was one, open source. We have a basic. Well, the basic rule is that we try not to broadcast crap. I mean, we try to have our news stories be reasonably truthful. We carry Deutsche Welle, which could be considered part of the Atlantic Alliance perspective. It's just like on my website, I use a BBC newsfeed, and I'm thinking, do I really want to do that? But anyway, it opens. We do carry we carry Democracy Now!, so we get that perspective, and then we try to carry a pretty good, basically left progressive point of view. I don't know. We try not to be political explicitly, but I guess it has to do with our own perspective on what makes sense.
So is it a commercial station or non-commercial?
No, non-commercial. We're nonprofit.
Gotcha.
We're organized under a 501c3 that we needed one to apply for this license, and it was very fortunate that a local woman here had one already running called International Educational Resources for Rural Missouri. So it was like a perfect fit, really.
So you're most widely known, though, for Tinker versus Des Moines Board of Education, or Des Moines School District, a landmark civil rights Supreme Court case, right? Tell us, how did that come about?
Well, the Vietnam War became more and more intense in 1965. I was 14 years old at the time. My father, at that time in our life, was working for a Quaker organization called the American Friends Service Committee, and his job title was Peace Education Secretary. So his job was to organize symposia and lectures and all kinds of informational events to get people up to speed on international affairs, basically, on war and peace issues. And so we had quite a bit of information about the war in Vietnam that was contrary to the U.S. administration's position. And my parents were lifelong peace activists, and before that, really civil rights activists up in Iowa. My dad actually got asked to leave two different Methodist churches. He was a pastor, a Methodist pastor, a preacher, and because of his civil rights movement activities, he was asked to leave. That happened twice when I was a kid. So then the Quakers invited him to work for them, and that's how he got that job. But anyway, we knew quite a bit about what was going on in Vietnam relative to what the general public knew. And so when the big demonstration, the first big one over the Thanksgiving holiday of 1965 in Washington, D.C., my father organized, or helped organize, a couple of busloads of college students mostly to go to Washington to be part of that big demonstration against the war. And my mother belonged to Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and they were actually part of the coalition of organizations that put these chartered buses together. So I asked if I could go, and my parents agreed that I could go. And so I went to Washington, D.C., and on the way back there was a discussion on us of what we might do to continue to protest against the war, to try to bring awareness to the general public about what was going on with regard to Vietnam. And somebody said that they had heard that there were groups that were going to wear black armbands, which are a traditional symbol of mourning. When somebody dies in your family, you might wear a black armband. So anyway, people thought that was a good idea. I thought it was a good idea. It's non-disruptive. You're not really in anybody's face. You're just wearing that black armband. And so there were four of us, high school students, on those buses. And we all belonged, coincidentally, to a Unitarian youth group. I, by then, was attending the Quaker meeting, and then after the Quaker meeting, I go to the Unitarian church for the youth group, and I was a member of the Unitarian youth group. We decided as a group, kids, to wear the armbands for two reasons. We were mourning the death of everyone on both sides of the conflict, and we were promoting Robert Kennedy's call for a Christmas truce that year. So one of our high school students wrote up an article for his school newspaper explaining what we were doing. When his faculty advisor saw what he'd written, he got on the phone and called the principal and informed him of what was up, that this was coming along. And did he know about it? No, he didn't. And he got on the phone to the other principals and informed them that it was coming up. And they had a meeting, and they decided to not permit the armbands. And so they told the newspaper, and we read about that decision then in the newspaper. So that was 2 days before we were actually planning to wear them. And time passed.
How many kids in total were going to come wearing armbands?
There were going to be about a dozen, but then when, or perhaps a few more, but then when they had the ban was announced, then that dropped to 5. There were only 5. There were a couple of students that wore armbands that didn't have any problems, so they weren't part of the lawsuit. But anyway, we decided to sue in the federal court and worked its way up through the courts, and then we won at the Supreme Court, rather a large 7-2, victory at the Supreme Court. And then over the years, it has been referred to by many other cases, and so it's become the primary First Amendment case for public school students, and actually also for teachers. It's the famous paragraph, one of them from our case, is that it refers to neither students nor teachers shed their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate. So that's how it turned out. It wasn't we were just opposing the war. That was our intention and our motive. But the years passed, and it's become quite a big deal. It's going to have its 50th anniversary of the decision. Will be next February.
Well, let me ask you this now. This is 1965, so there wasn't a lot of popular opposition to the war at that time. How was this received by your fellow students? Were they supportive?
It's funny because, like my friends, I grew up during the Civil Rights Movement, and my parents were involved in it. So I went to civil rights demonstrations, and I was called the N-word lover at school. I mean, I was really bullied over that. I kind of grew up with those expectations in a way. I forget where we were going with that.
Were you well received by your classmates?
Oh, yeah. Well, as a result, everyone knew, where I was on civil rights and the war. I didn't hide my opinions, and I was just a kid. But kids have opinions, and they pick up opinions, and they talk about things. So my friends that I already had, they already knew those things about me. So they stayed with me, and some of the kids at school bullied me. Really, they harassed me. They called me a coward or a commie, things like that. But most people really just didn't care. That was a real surprising thing to me. It's a lot of I talk about this to student groups, teacher groups. And so I get asked those questions quite a bit, but the real answer to that, how did people react question, is most of them don't react at all. But anyway, it was a real mix. It was a spectrum from people being proud of me, like I had a history teacher who actually bumped my grade up from a B to an A. He said he knew another teacher had knocked me down a grade over it, so he was compensating. And another teacher invited me to talk to his students several different years. I wore it in 10th grade, so I had 2 more years of school there. And one teacher every year would have me talk to his students about the war in Vietnam. So that was really.
So you were planning on wearing the armbands, but then they passed a rule saying that you weren't allowed to wear them, but you wore them anyway? Is that what happened?
Yeah. that's what happened. I got on the phone. We hadn't met again as a group, the students that were going to wear the armbands, after we had heard about the ban on the armbands. And so that morning, about 7:15, I guess, I got on the phone, and my younger sister had already gone to school with an armband. But I got on the phone and suggested that we hold off until we have a chance to meet together, discuss this new circumstance of the principals saying we couldn't do it. But a couple went to school anyway that day and got kicked out, and the rest of them waited. And then we called in the afternoon. We called after school. We called to the school board and tried to talk to the president of the school board to explain that we were not going to be disruptive. We were just going to wear these black pieces of cloth. And he said he didn't care. He didn't want to talk to us even. So at that point, I felt thoroughly justified to go ahead and wear it, and the next day I did. I could tell you a little more of the story, the actual getting kicked out part.
Let's hear that. Yeah.
I'd been wearing the armband all morning over a suit jacket. It was kind of dark. It wasn't black, but nobody really saw the armband, or those that didn't say anything. And my math teacher, I'm pretty sure, saw it, but he just didn't say anything. So I took off my suit jacket after gym class. I just got dressed again with just my white shirt and an armband over it, and it stood out really well. And then I went to the cafeteria for lunch and sat with my friends there. And some kids came over and were kind of harassing me and calling me a commie and this and that. And a football player came up and said, you guys have your opinion about the war. John has his opinion about the war, and John has a right to his opinion, so leave him alone. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a jock, and here he is defending me. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then an office worker saw it. She took the news back to the office, so I was called into the office. That was quite a conversation. It was a long conversation, and he didn't bully me. He was calm, tried to convince me that I was wrong. He had been a Vietnam or a Korean War veteran, and he said sometimes maybe I don't understand how during a war it's important to support your country. He said maybe I've been listening to the wrong people. Maybe I've been listening to some communist propaganda. So on. I mean, he was paternalistic toward me, but he was also kind of respectful. And then at the end, he said, "Now I'm going to ask you to take that off, and if you take it off, you can go back to school, and it'll be just like nothing happened." I said, "But I don't think you're going to take it off, are you?" So anyway, he kicked me out. He said, "Well, I'm going to have to send you home." Anyway, it was interesting to me because the level of conflict wasn't really as great as you might think. I don't know. I guess my principal, he could have said, "No, let's not have the ban," back when they had the meeting of the principals. But I think they were embarrassed by us. They felt vulnerable to the community to have any of their students expressing an opinion against the war, because the war propaganda really was such a strong factor, and everybody was being influenced by the administration line because of the limited number of news outlets and so on. It was the whole country was really kind of marching lockstep down this path, and being told that if we don't fight the communists in Vietnam, we'll be fighting them in Oakland, California. It was really hard.
It was a whole other world. It was a whole other world in 1965, and I was born in 1962, and I'm from the Bronx. Yeah, right. But even still, I heard a story you told, I think it was on C-SPAN, where there was only one black family in your neighborhood, and they weren't allowed to swim in the public pool.
Yep.
In 1965.
No, that was in the 50s.
Okay.
That was in a small town in Iowa that my dad was the Methodist minister in that town. And there was one family, and the kids weren't allowed to swim in the swimming pool. And it was like the church youth group found out about that, and they decided to take it up with the city council. And instead of just correcting the problem, the city council got upset by it all. And the people that were in my dad's church said that he was causing conflict and controversy in the community. And they didn't want that, so they asked him to leave. And interestingly, when we got to Des Moines, to his next church, a very similar thing happened. We had invited our black friends. By then, our mother was set that we were going to know some black kids. We were going to be friends with some black kids. So she made connections. She made friends in the black community, and her friends that had kids became our friends. And so we invited them to go to church with us, and the same kind of thing. They didn't want black people in the church, so they asked our dad to leave again. It just broke his heart. It really did. He thought he was of the Christian school of thought called the social gospel. His thinking was that if you could just get people to understand that we're all part of humanity, then we could make a peaceful world. And that's what he was expecting would happen. But instead he was getting kicked out of church. And so anyway, that's when the Quakers, who have a long history of taking dissident positions, they asked him. They were very happy to have someone who had been involved in the civil rights movement. So at that point, we started attending the Quaker meeting, and that was very enriching to our experience, too.
It's fascinating because, I tell my audience that I'm a socialist, and I'm also a Christian. I'm a born-again Christian. And to some people, it makes their head explode. They just can't get the concept. It's like, what? That's impossible. Just watch their head explode. Now, I have a quick question for you. Now, you've been influenced a great deal by your parents, what they've instilled in you, their morals and their beliefs. How about your brothers and sisters? Did any of them lose their path and vote for Trump or anything like that? Or are they still... No, not really. Our older brother, the firstborn, like when we were growing up and we were turning into hippies, he was kind of turning into a cowboy. So he's very blue collar and very competent heating and air conditioning technician, self-employed. But his politics are mainstream Democratic Party. So our big argument was over Hillary Clinton, and he was insisting that we must support Hillary Clinton. I was insisting that no, not necessarily. But anyway, no, most of us, I would say, I honestly, it's like, well, how much of it is your parents' influence, and how much was it that your parents just had it right? That's really how I kind of view it, and I've never really. It all just made so much sense. The worldview that I got from them made so much sense that I still have it. It's like I still see things in roughly the same way. Now, how did it come about that the ACLU heard about your situation there?
Well, we got a call from a guy named what's his first name, Kunstler,
Oh, really? William Kunstler?
Yeah, William Kunstler called us right up, and he said he would be our lawyer pro bono, because he thought we had a First Amendment case. And so my parents asked around to the people they knew, who is William Kunstler? And they said, no, don't use him. He's too radical. So the Iowa Civil Liberties Union had a woman, Louise Noun, and she had inherited a fortune, so she was a philanthropist, but with a very strong civil libertarian bent. So she had been a patroness of the Iowa Civil Liberties Union for a long time, and they offered to handle our legal expenses, and they had a young lawyer, a 29-year-old lawyer, Dan Johnston, who took our case pro bono, and so that's how the ACLU became involved. And later, actually, my mother in St. Louis, when they had moved by then from Des Moines to St. Louis, our mother was involved in a lead paint coalition against landlords that weren't dealing with the lead paint issue, and the kids were eating the paint chips and getting health damage from that. So she was a social activist about that at that time, and she actually worked with William Kunstler again, or for the first time actually, but they met again. But anyway, no, that's how the ICLU and then the ACLU became involved in the case.
Yeah, I met Kunstler a few times because, like I said, I'm from New York, and I was with the Yippies in New York, Youth International Party, and he was the Yippie lawyer for the Yippies down there.
Well, now since you brought it up, I was at a rally during the Chicago 7 or 8 trial.
Okay.
And Abby Hoffman had come down to St. Louis. Now, my mother had worked with Abby Hoffman to help organize one of the national demonstrations in Washington. So after I was way at the back of this thing, we got there late, and Abby Hoffman was giving a talk telling the whole huge crowd about the trial up in Chicago. And afterward, my mom kind of took my sleeve and she dragged me through the crowd, and she's saying, Abby, I want you to meet my son, So anyway, I got up and shook his big warm hand, a big warm-hearted guy, and he's sitting there he's got a dirty red T-shirt on, and it's up above his belly, and he's scratching his belly, talking to me, but I really became aware of what it's like to have such a focus on social change that he and Jerry Rubin and that whole bunch did way back then. They really thought that it was worthwhile to make a full commitment, and so with the Yippie and all of that, I was my heart was there.
For students today in school, what are their rights of free speech?
Well, the main right that you have is to express your opinion, as long as it's not explicitly promoting drug use that's illegal, which is the Morse v. Frederick or the Blankets for Jesus case. And then it cannot use sexual innuendo in the language. That's the Bethel v. Frazier case. And it also cannot be under the imprimatur of the school. So if it's a school-sponsored event or publication, then they can control the content. But other than that, if you are expressing your opinion in a non-disruptive way to the educational environment, then you have your full First Amendment right to do that.
So what would you recommend a student do then if they want to express their their opinions, and they're doing it in a non-disruptive way. It has nothing to do with drugs. It's not a school-sponsored event, and they followed all the Tinker Standard, right, they call it, right? They followed all the Tinker Standard, but still they're being denied their First Amendment right. What should they do?
Well, contact the ACLU is always a good first step. They're funded to some degree, and they have the resources to deal with it. A lot of times, all they have to do is make a phone call to the school administration and explain what the real deal is, because the law is pretty clear on that. If in the decision, Abe Fortas wrote, that Justice Abe Fortas wrote that there needs to be a material and substantial disruption to the educational environment before the school authorities can clamp down on it. And he says in so many words basically that a little bit of disruption has to be tolerated, because that's the way our society is, and that's the way a democracy works. And so if you have students that have come up with a non-disruptive way to just let their opinion be known, then there's really you've got the right to do that is pretty well established. Even conservative justices like Samuel Alito is very clear on that the Supreme Court has said a number of times, really, not just in our case, in the cases that are quoted by our case, the Supreme Court has pointed out over and over again that we are not a totalitarian society, and the schools can't be what they call enclaves of totalitarianism. So once that's explained to school administrations, often they come around, and it never gets to a court.
So they should complain to the principal or to the school district, the school board?
Well, basically what you want to do is let the school know that you know what your rights are. And let them contact their lawyer or whatever and have it explained to them if they really don't understand. But it's very clearly established. This is not one of those murky areas. If the students are not disruptive to the educational environment, then there's nothing the administration can legally do. They can misbehave. You can have misbehavior at any point, but once a lawyer has explained it, even their own lawyer, and that really happens.
And so the fact that the students are underage, they have just as much rights, free speech rights as an adult.
Absolutely, with the proviso that there is compulsory education,
right. And
so the students that are in school are not allowed to disrupt what they call the educational environment. So.
Now, what about walkouts? You see all these walkouts now that are over the gun situation, school shootings. What a different world. But what is that covered?
No. In fact, that would be the school board would use our case probably to argue their side, because our case establishes the right to express your opinion in a way that doesn't disrupt the educational environment. And it's the special circumstances of the school. The walkout is disruptive to the educational environment. So the walkout, I wouldn't say don't do it. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying don't do it. But be prepared to that if the administration of your school is really being, okay, insert your ugly word here, okay, if they are really can't understand why students could be especially concerned about this sort of thing, and the gun violence, especially down where you are, where you just had that horrific event. I mean, if the administrator, I saw an administrator in Texas had said that he was going to suspend students who walked out. But, I mean, all administrators are not nasty people. And some of them just, are unenlightened. I'll give them that. He might be a nice guy that just hasn't quite got it yet. That everything is not always about following those old rules. Sometimes new things happen, and you kind of have to make exceptions. And when you have a whole bunch of school kids getting killed, that's worth an exception. And there are a lot of school administrators that are going with that and are going to be with their kids, and they're going to walk to the state legislature or whatever it is.
Yeah, my daughter is in the middle right now of negotiating with the principal about a walkout that they're planning. Now, is there a website or something they can point to? Wikipedia? Would they look up a Tinker Standard and show them that?
If you, well, for instance, on my own website of all of these thousands of news feeds, I do have one on Tinker v. Des Moines. So if you go, there's a shortcut to it. For your listeners, if they go to schema-root.org/tinker, that's schema-ROOT.org/tinker, all lowercase. That would get you to my page, and on that page, I've got all of the resources that I would normally send to high school students and so on that are doing projects about the case. So it's kind of a collection point. I guess I have some dead links that I need to deal with there, but most of them are good. And it also has a current news feed. And so from that news feed, there are stories that refer to the case basically nearly every day. And in those stories, you'll have different reporters, or sometimes the ACLU or the Student Press Law Center, or somebody else will be explaining something. And so you can get the essence of the case actually just by reading the news feed. You can read the case, the decision directly. The Wikipedia article is a good article, and so you can learn a lot from there. And the basic principle of the Tinker Standard, I think, is explained in the Wikipedia article.
Well, let me ask you this. Recently we had Colin Kaepernick, a football player. First he wasn't standing for the national anthem, now he's taking a knee because he was protesting unarmed civilians being shot down by police. And this, for a while there, it had branched out to high school students were doing the same thing at their sporting events. And is that covered under the Tinker Standard?
Yes, it is. It certainly is. And if it's unclear, I'm not. Okay, it's different. It's different for schools, for athletes at a school-sponsored athletic event. I think they are covered. If for a non-football player, I don't know. If you're just, I'm pretty sure that it would be covered. I certainly hope so. I mean, next to having us doing the stiff arm salute, the West Virginia versus Barnett, 1943, is where you have Jehovah's Witnesses not wanting to salute the flag, and the court during the middle of the World War II, said they don't have to salute the flag because we're not the Nazis. And I mean, they put it in formal language, but that's what they were saying, and that's the general principle, really. And it comes up when you're wondering, is it okay or is it not okay? Is it okay? I was at a school in Chicago, kind of a big assembly, and the principal, as part of his introduction to me, I was the speaker, he demonstrated gang symbol prohibitions, various symbols that you are not allowed to use in school. And it was pretty complex, and he went on for, a couple of minutes, one sign after another that these are not permitted. And by the time he was done, you're thinking, wow, it's like, how do you be free when you have to go through a whole catalog of things that aren't permitted? Maybe it's just easier to assume that nothing is permitted, and I'll go sit in a corner and read a book or something. And I think it's really important that we, freedom implies that we should be able to figure it out ourselves. Is it right or wrong what we're doing? Are we really offending against some principle here? Are we offending someone else's right by doing this? Are we damaging, harming? Is there anything? We should be able to figure it out. And if somebody is taking a knee and the next person says, no, you can't do that, you wonder, can't you figure that out? It's like, my view is that we need to learn to figure it out on our own, somewhat, and not be led around by like a bull with a nose ring. It's like we should be able to have some kind of a moral, ethical perspective and some sense of what the general rule is here. Don't hurt other people, and so on.
Yeah, you would think so. You would think so, It sounds so simple. We could go on about that forever. Even I don't even want to get into it, but what about in a school? You can't wear gang jackets, right? Or gang signs or gang colors. That's prohibited, isn't it?
Yeah, they can prohibit that.
How can they? Because isn't that freedom of speech too as well?
Well, because freedom of speech is like, there's different kinds of speech, and just to set extremes, you can't say you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. So that establishes the principle that all speech is not necessarily protected. And you can't go into a bank and say your money or your life and claim that that's the speech there is instrumental. It's something else. Now the gang, what's a gang? Is a gang necessarily a group? Maybe not, but maybe so. And I don't know. I'm not trying to say what should be really, but it's more trying to understand how people are afraid of certain things. In terms of gang colors, it's going to come up more likely, like gang colors do come up in cities especially, but the Confederate flag or the swastika, something. And I think what it's going to come to is that they're going to, like the hate speech, the whole hate speech thing. It's like there's a borderline where expressing an idea, actually just in a kind of a non-threatening way, to express an idea and say, even an abhorrent idea, even a really horrible idea, but if you can kind of say it in a neutral tone and it's not taken a direct threat or something like that. But when you go into hate speech and you start shouting names at each other and so on, it's kind of coming closer to assault. And especially in a school environment, you can't do that. In a sense, 50 years ago we did this black armband thing, and it still stands. And partly that's because of the non-disruptive nature, and partly it's because there was no question that it was what they call pure speech. It was an idea that we. And so those are going to be more protected. When it veers off into disruptive, assaultive speech, then I think there starts. First obligation of human being is to be a decent person. I really think, and a lot of hate speech should be filtered out a little bit before it actually occurs. That's in a better world, I guess.
Yeah, but we have to allow it because otherwise, we have to allow unpopular speech because in 1965 or 1955, it was popular not to allow those blacks to swim in the swimming pool. You know,
no, you're stating one of the primary principles of free speech. It's like free speech is when you have free speech for the idea that you hate.
Right.
That's free speech. No, that's totally true. That's totally true. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about speech that becomes like an assault,
right?
Or when you're inciting that kind of speech. It's like if you start shouting kill and then fill in the blank, kill some minority, or maybe not the minority. But if you start exhorting people to do violent things, it becomes more than just the expression of an idea. It becomes an attack. And the law, somebody said that the Constitution is not a suicide pact. Well, written law itself is not a suicide pact. And there are first principles, I would say, regarding your right to defend yourself, and so on. And we're better off, the free speech advocates are really better off overall if we just avoid this is my view, if we can avoid the fine distinctions a little bit and kind of back away from the edge of the cliff and then use our speech to talk about what we really think is important and not to be testing the limit to see where the limit is, but do the right thing and then defend your right to do the right thing. Be clear on what you're thinking and what you want to do. And then once you're clear that it's right for you to do it. And the law may or may not agree with you, but that shouldn't affect too much whether you decide to do it or not.
John Tucker, we're out of time. How can people find you? And again, tell them about your website there.
Well, that's probably the best way. If they go to that homepage on schema-root.org, and there's a contact us link, and that's me. It's editor@schema-root.org is my email address, and I welcome email from anyone. Even if you hate what I said, just tell me that. And if you're reasonable, I'll discuss it with you. Ed, thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay, then we had John Tinker, who was the guy behind. This is the guy that went to the Supreme Court and got free speech for our kids in school. It's called the Tinker Standard. And you could find him. What is this website here? You couldn't hear him at all there. That music was coming up there. The audio on that thing was horrible. I don't know what we're going to do. Good old John Tinker. Schema-root.org. And that's spelled SCHEMA-root.org. And this has all kinds of stuff and all kinds of links to different kinds of news, RSS feeds, I suppose it is. And he's got a radio station down there in Missouri and a national hero that put his butt on the line, went all the way to the Supreme Court and stood up for his principles there. There it is 50 years later. And we have him to thank for this kind of stuff. I like to bring in that kind of stuff here on the Opperman Report. I want to give a shout out to St. John Hunt. Got him on the show yesterday. St. John Hunt. You can find him at the JFKConferenceDC.com. He's down there it's called a big event. It's about the JFK assassination. St. John Hunt's father was one of the JFK assassins. Was one of the assassins there. E. Howard Hunt, CIA agent, who was one of the Watergate burglars. And St. John Hunt now is working for Roger Stone. And if you listen to yesterday's show, we have an exclusive accounting of what's going on behind the scenes there with Roger Stone by a good friend of Roger Stone who talks to Roger Stone every day. Got all this stuff about Sam the Nunberg and all that stuff, but also, too, about their new book that just came out, Away with Words. That's a new book that hasn't been announced by anybody but me. that Roger Stone wrote with St. John Hunt about what's been going on with Julian Assange and the FBI investigation and WikiLeaks and all the craziness with the colluding. And St. John seems convinced that there was no colluding going on, right? You have a different opinion, but yeah, he's right there. He's in the loop, as you might say there. Enjoy today's show, or yesterday's show for that matter, if you enjoy the show at all. And I hope you do. I put a lot of work into the show. And it really upsets me when they have these kind of audio problems. I'm hoping to salvage this interview we just did with John Tinker. But if you enjoy the show, there's more in the member section at OppermanReport.com. OppermanReport.com. We're more in the member section there. Where exclusive interviews, all kinds of stuff. I interviewed the guy who rented the Steve Bannon's porn and meth house, and he talks about how there were padlocks on the doors and windows, like they were locking somebody in. There was evidence of meth production. There was people reporting they were filming pornos in there. All kinds of shows like that. McMartin Preschool, exclusive information on that. People talk about the film Tim Tate and Conspiracy of Silence, about the Franklin cover-up. I found the guy who made the film, this censored film, people talk about it, but I found the guy, There's a lot of good content there at OppermanReport.com. If you want to advertise on the show, you get. And now a word from our sponsors.
Hi, folks. Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Get the Tea, your best defense.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company. They're located in India, so you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring, research network, customer care, press release, content writing and distribution, and much, much more. Now, you can get a hold of Subash Technosis by email at info@subashtechnosis.com. Their website is www.subashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication or involved in an extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we do an email trace investigation for you, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. You can have your ad played here at oppermanreport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report